Who is the most delusional person you've known? Guy at my college thought he was God's gift to women just because he worked out daily. He looked more like an albino Dwayne Johnson with curly hair. It was like Casper took steroids and started hitting on anything that moved. Met a guy in the psych ward with psychosis who believed he was a prophet. Really nice guy. I have a quote written by him. "Madness is not pure error, it is nature's dissatisfaction with genius." My grandmother was a nurse in a psych ward years ago. And she encountered a patient who was convinced he was the second coming of Jesus. He even talked like Jesus. She said, "If I hadn't known he was nuts, I might have believed him." I work in a small town radio station. I've seen lots of rookies fresh out of broadcast school let the tiny amount of fame they get from being on a small town radio station go to their head. This one guy came into work one day. Madder than hell that small town radio famous wasn't famous enough to get him out of a speeding ticket. Known personally? Has to be my grandmother. Who would tell me to lower my voice because the Jews will hear you. Same woman who was furious when she asked her son to go and buy some Christmas lights for the shrubs outside the house. And he came home with some very pretty blue net lights. She screamed at the top of her voice. Blue is a Jew color. I don't even know what she was afraid of. Jewish people. She never articulated it. Edited to at, I wasn't even talking about Jewish people when she told me to keep my voice down. I was a little kid. I was probably talking about Sailor Moon or Pokemon or something. My aunt, my mom's sister. She constantly stirs drama with other people and then calls you out for being mean to her. WTF lady. For example, one time I came outside and I see her pull up in her car. She starts chit-chatting to my mom. They're talking about her haircut. I tell my mom we needed to go and she drove away shortly after. Totally fine. I get a call from another relative a week later that she's angry with me because the day she came over I rolled my eyes at her and she read slips. She knows I said something about her. This didn't happen. She then continues to post on social media how karma is gonna get me, while simultaneously commenting on all of my stuff, saying how cute my daughter is. My little sister. Me and my eldest sister were raised by an alcoholic mother who left us with random people so she could get drunk. When I was about 6 my mom sobered up and had my little sister. The girl is delusional and has adopted the idea that she went through what me and my older sister went through. She recalls memories that never happened. She swears my mom beat her. Never happened. She makes up stories. Like she was a mortician. She traveled around the world. She dated such and such and had tons of money. It's so weird. She spends every waking moment on Facebook and posts every single thing that goes on in her life. She has a felony. She beat her baby daddy until they broke up and now both of those psychos have a really shitty custody fight going on. I could go on and on. My ex-boyfriend plays the victim to his friends and family. Yet I have spoken to 2 of his exes and we've all called the cops on him at some point. He obsesses and stalks and harasses. He tried to break into my app once after we broke up to apologize to me and tried to convince my roommate I was unstable and making rash choices. We've been broken up 7 months now. I have a new BF. And he still sends me emails saying I'm being unreasonable : A friend of mine tried to argue with me that him coming from a wealthy family made it harder for him to find a job. His reasoning was bias, not enough experience. No one said you couldn't work when you were younger. You just didn't have to. My schizophrenic uncle. He ran away from home, us, in his teens to Turkey. Converted to Islam. Came home a few years later. Believed he was the son of God and robbed a bank so he could give the money to the homeless in the city we live in. He was institutionalized for many years. Was released one day with no notice to our family and died shortly thereafter of an accident caused by his mental illness. A very, very good friend of mine. Comes from a super rich family. His dad recently bought $1 million home. To sell it to him for under $300,000. He thinks his family isn't that wealthy. And this isn't that abnormal. My friend's ex went off her bipolar meds because she was convinced love was the cure to her bipolar disorder. I feel better now, so that means I don't need my meds anymore. Bipolar isn't a bacterial infection. You don't take meds for a while and then you're cured of it. Weirdly, they broke up after about the millionth violent mood swing. And now she spends her days getting fired from every single job and doing hallucinogenics. My current boss. He thinks the business is doing okay or is in a rough spot. He's slowly choking and killing it with his managing. I see the shop closing mid to late August. A dear friend of mine. Very smart. Capable woman otherwise. Had her college paid for by her parents. One day she said to me, completely serious, "Sometimes I wish that I had student loans." I told her please feel free to cut me a $500 check every month. And she didn't have a lot to say about that. I also used to work with a real born on third base but thought she hit a triple kind of person. One year, I got royally screwed by taxes because I didn't realize my employer was neglecting to take out some of the taxes they were supposed to. And I ended up owing $2,500 plus in taxes, which forced me to empty my savings to the point where I had $90 total in all my bank accounts. This woman looked me square in the eye and asked me, completely serious, "Why didn't you bring it to your accountant?" I grew up middle class. Or maybe even upper middle class. But my parents never let me feel like I deserved it. The obliviousness of people who grew up with money is just infuriating to me. Like those people who unironically ask why don't they just get a better job. This dude who used to live near me. There is a laundry list of stories, but two gems are: when he took those fake $1 billion bills you get at Halloween from church groups to Walmart, filled 8 shopping carts with random expensive stuff, mostly electronics, and tried to buy them with the money. Or when, after the cops being called for him shooting our much younger neighbor with an airsoft gun, he grabbed a samurai sword and charged at the cops. Spoiler alert. He got tased. He later told us if they shot at him he would cut the bullets in half like Ryan Reynolds did in X-Men Origins Wolverine. My little sister who somehow got it into her head that we grew up in the ghetto. We didn't. And that it is okay to keep popping out kids with different baby daddies because if God didn't want me to have babies, he wouldn't let me get pregnant. OMFG, I want to hit her in the face every time she says something like this. BTW. She is now pregnant with her 5th child, right after being a complete hypocrite when she got pregnant last year and had an abortion because she wanted a girl. She is finally having her girl. So hopefully she stops. And before I get a bunch of angry messages, she lives off the government. Baby daddies do not support their kids. So she brags about being a hustler. SMDH. Worked a night job where I met someone who was studying rather than going to school. Eventually I got out of him that he was studying to be a seducer. He studied Cleopatra, Rasputin, Casanova, etc. to learn the art of seduction. Basically this guy's life plan was to just seduce his way through life. He had an intricate plan on how he was going to seduce our supervisor for a raise, seduce multiple spouses to support him, even how to get free coffee by seducing the barista. He must have done a lot of seducing to keep working that barely of minimum wage night job for years. My brother was always bragging about how chicks he worked with wanted to duck him. Then after 2 or 3 months when he inevitably quit or got fired, whenever the guys were talking about chicks they hooked up with, he would always talk about these beautiful women that wanted him which he just never got around to hooking up with. One time after starting a new job, he comes home all excited and yells, "Holy shit. The receptionist at this place is gorgeous and guess what? She wants to duck me." I said, "Dude, you've been there one day. How do you know she wants to duck you?" So he says, "Well, I just walked through the front door and as I was passing by, she looks me dead in the eye and says, 'Good morning.'" A girl that was interested in me told me that she came from another planet. That she wasn't human. She was 100% serious. Even told me I was like her and we were maybe from the same planet. 10/10 would nope again. My father. The man does not live in the same reality as the rest of us. He is almost 60 and still thinks he's going to make it in the music business despite the fact that he has no band and plays no gigs. He's a passable guitar player. But the typical guy that had a band in the 70s and early 80s takes himself way too seriously as if he's some kind of prolific musician. He took some mediocre pictures of the band Genesis in the 80s and has called himself a photographer since then. He built himself and a couple friends some very primitive websites and calls himself a web designer. He has a couple of video cameras and knows the basics of video editing. And now he bills himself as a videographer for local bands. The man just makes shit up to make himself seem important. He hasn't had an actual job in 13 years. He's been self-employed in that time. But you need to have actual clients and stuff. He thinks he's above everyone. The smartest guy in the room. And just this grand person. It's ridiculous. IDK how his wife puts up with it. An ex-friend of mine cried multiple times because she thought guys were only interested in me and not her. And that I must be doing something insane to attract their attention since she's the skinnier, more obsessed with her looks one. Definitely my uncle. He claims to be the descendant of some wealthy noble family from Germany and goes around genealogy websites adding himself and my grandmother to said family, claiming she's a princess. Not my dad though. He doesn't count. This is only the latest one. He also has pretended to be a priest and a diplomat at some point, as well as having several diseases, so he could get money, sympathy from people and heavy prescription drugs, HIV, melanoma, Parkinson's. The list goes on. We tried having him admitted, but he always gets discharged a day or two later. Since he's very good at convincing everyone he's fine and that's us that want him out of the picture. Edit, typo. A friend growing up kinda just started being a piece of shit as soon as we got out of high school. I was friends with both him and his girlfriend. It got to the point where he would tell her to walk to my house after work instead of picking her up because I was close by and he didn't want to drop what he was doing, usually getting high in another friend's basement. Then he physically assaulted her. I blew up at him. She wised up and moved on. And then he had the gonads to actually post my friends and girlfriend abandoned me. I guess nice guys really do finish last after she left him. Never wanted to get physical with a former friend so far. Then when I was 18-21, I had a 40-year-old boss who just so badly wanted to be one of us kids. Only he was also a creep. Knew he was a creep, but blamed it on being Hispanic. How you are so self-aware while also fooling yourself and being a creep is beyond me. My fiancé has a childhood friend who doesn't believe in space. He doesn't believe there are planets either. He also believes the Earth is flat, which somehow isn't a planet either. When asked to explain his beliefs, he provided a biblical explanation that made no sense. And I don't just mean no sense like that's ridiculous, but no sense like, I have no idea what you just said. I knew a girl that would instantly fall in love with almost any boy she met. I mean, it was hard to talk to her because she was always talking about a boy she wanted to kiss or ask out and she'd become obsessed with them. The problem was that 99.9% of the time, the guys didn't have any interest in her and I'd get calls in the late hours of the night with her crying because some boy she liked didn't want her. It got really bad to the point that her parents had to shut down her phone's camera and texting ability because she was sending naked pictures of herself to guys to try and win them back. So now the only way she talks to people is by calling them. And she is always calling me to the point that I haven't answered her in months. I have a friend who believes that everything that happens in her life is the universe's plan for her. She also believes that if she thinks happy thoughts, the universe will only send good things to her. She deals with every problem by saying that the universe has a better plan, and if she thinks positively, that better plan will come. That is as delusional as it gets. Zero accountability for her actions. My uncle decided his thoughts were so profound he tried selling printed canvases with some of his quotes on them. Yes, sentences he came up with himself. And no, he is not successful or any sort of leader in his field, nor anything that would warrant quoting or displaying anything he has ever said. He also decided to write a book on his life, of which he has achieved sucking my auntie dry of money and contact with her family because none of us want to be around him. Spiritually pious and illusions of grandeur. Man. I thought most of these would be funny. But now I'm kinda sad. It's terrifying to think that people can go their whole lives. Their one shot at existence. Being so sheltered and afraid. What a bummer. My stepsister. She and her mother have some weird delusion where anything bad that happens to them will be taken care of by someone else. They never have to take responsibility for anything or actively attempt to change their own lives. It's all about what someone else can do for them. It's the oddest thing. Example. Just got off the phone with my mom telling me my stepsister had no idea she would have student loans to pay back once she graduated. She thought the university gave her a free ride. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I know a girl that is incredibly against modern medicine, including all vaccines. She believes that giving her child proper nutrition will keep them from getting diseases. Yup. Just take some celery, that'll get rid of that polio. Family of some friends of mine. They have 8 kids. 9th on the way and they live by the philosophy that God will provide. They do not work. They are barely able to feed the kids. They all have dirty, ragged clothes and live with whichever family members are able to tolerate them at the time. One of those friends of mine lined a job up for the father who quit 2 weeks into the job. When I say quit, I mean he just stopped showing up. And when confronted about all of these things and the well-being of their kids, they just keep saying God will provide.